I'm Maria. And numbers were always my safe place. Budgets, savings, the quiet logic of spreadsheets, those were things I could trust. Life taught me early that stability matters. My mother raised me on her own in a modest house in Dallas, showing me how to stretch a dollar and stand on my own 2 feet. By my 30s, I was an accountant with a predictable life, steady, calm, unremarkable. At least, until the night everything shifted. A friend dragged me to a crowded rooftop party downtown. I was ready to sneak out, clutching my soda like a shield, when I saw him, Jack. Tall, confident, with a smile that made the city noise blur into silence. He walked straight toward me and said, "You're Maria, right?" I laughed nervously, not knowing then that this man, the one who seemed like a dream, would one day demand I pack my bags. Our first date was nothing fancy, just a quiet Italian place tucked between a bookstore and a laundromat. But when Jack pulled out my chair and flashed that same disarming smile from the rooftop, it felt like the whole restaurant lit up. He ordered pasta with some elaborate sauce, while I stuck to something simple, still too nervous to risk tomato stains on my dress. He leaned across the table and asked, "Tell me something nobody else knows about you." I laughed, poking at my food. "That's easy. I can solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute." His eyes widened. "No way. You're going to have to prove that. Deal?" Something about the way he said it made me loosen up. We talked for hours about his frustration with his corporate design job, my love of mystery novels, and dreams we hadn't told anyone else. By the end of the night, I felt like I'd known him forever. The next weeks were a blur of coffee dates, late-night drives through the Dallas skyline, and endless conversations that seemed to erase the rest of the world. Jack showed me hidden spots in the city, a hole-in-the-wall taco place he swore had the best salsa in Texas, a quiet overlook where the city lights shimmered like scattered diamonds. He was charming, attentive, and for once, I didn't feel like the boring accountant. With Jack, I felt seen. He noticed the little things, how I tapped my fingers when I was anxious, how I always read dessert menus first, how I smiled when I talked about my mom. Then came the night at White Rock Lake. We sat on a blanket under the stars, the air warm with the hum of cicadas. Jack grew quiet, his hand brushing mine. "Maria," he said, voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I don't want to wait. I know it's fast, but will you marry me?" The world seemed to stop. My heart pounded as I searched his face, and all I saw was sincerity, or what I thought was sincerity. Tears blurred the stars above me as I whispered, "Yes." Our wedding was small, just close friends and family in a cozy hall draped with fairy lights. My mom cried through the entire ceremony, whispering that she was proud of me. Jack held my hands, promising forever. In that moment, surrounded by laughter and music, I believed him. I thought I'd found safety. I thought I'd built a future with a man who cherished me. But sometimes, what feels like destiny is really just the first step into a storm you never saw coming. After the honeymoon glow faded, reality settled in. Jack and I rented a small apartment in uptown Dallas. It wasn't glamorous, just 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a balcony that barely fit a chair, but it was ours. I loved the way sunlight spilled across the kitchen table in the mornings, the way Jack hummed off-key while making coffee. For a while, I thought we were building something solid. Then one evening, over takeout boxes and half-finished wine, Jack looked up and said, "What if we moved in with my parents?" I nearly choked on my noodles. "With your parents? Full-time?" "Yeah," he said casually, as if suggesting a weekend getaway. "They're getting older, and it'd save us a ton on rent. Plus, Mom's been hinting she'd love to have us there." I forced a smile, but my stomach tightened. My mom had always taught me the value of independence. Moving back in with parents felt like a step backward. But Jack pressed on, his charm disarming as ever. "It'll just be temporary. You'll see it'll be good for all of us." A few weeks later, we packed our lives into boxes and drove to his parents' house, a dated 2-story, with peeling shutters and furniture that smelled faintly of mothballs. His mother, Linda, greeted us at the door with a hug so tight I thought my ribs might crack. "Maria, welcome home," she said warmly, though her eyes scanned me like she was sizing me up. His father, Ron, gave a firm handshake and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. At first, I told myself it wasn't so bad. Linda insisted on cooking every meal, and Ron loved telling endless stories about his sales days. But soon, the cracks showed. Linda popped into our room uninvited to ask if we needed towels or snacks. Ron made comments about how nice it was to have an accountant in the family, with a tone that hinted at more than casual conversation. One night at dinner, Jack cleared his throat. "So, the house needs some repairs. Roof's leaking, plumbing's a mess. I was thinking we could all pitch in." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "Repairs? How much are we talking?" Ron sighed heavily. "More than we can handle right now." Linda clasped my hand, her eyes misty. "Oh, Maria, you're such a blessing. With your help, we could finally get this place back in shape." My pulse quickened. We'd just spent so much on the wedding. My savings were thin, but Jack looked at me, his expression soft, pleading. "It's for our future," he said quietly. Against my better judgment, I nodded. That night, as I wrote the first check, I told myself it was temporary, just a small sacrifice for the family I'd married into. But deep down, a voice whispered that I was stepping into a role I hadn't agreed to play. Not wife, not partner, just provider. The house looked better with every passing week. Fresh paint, new fixtures, a patched roof. Linda beamed at me as though I were some miracle worker, while Ron clapped me on the back like I was one of his own kids. "You're a lifesaver, Maria," he'd say, his grin wide, his eyes calculating. But every time I wrote another check, I felt the weight pressing harder on my chest. My savings were bleeding, yet I told myself it was worth it for Jack, for our marriage, for family. Then one night, over Linda's meatloaf and mashed potatoes, the air shifted. Jack cleared his throat, eyes darting between his parents. Linda's smile faltered. Ron stared at his plate. "What's going on?" I asked, already uneasy. Ron finally spoke, his voice heavy. "Maria, the truth is, the house isn't just old. It's drowning. We still owe on the mortgage $450,000. The bank's threatening foreclosure." The fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. "$450,000? My voice rose, sharp and disbelieving. "And you're telling me this now?" Linda's eyes welled with tears. "We didn't want to burden you. We thought we could manage. But with the repairs?" Her voice broke into a sob. "We're in over our heads." Jack's hand brushed mine, but I pulled away. "You knew?" He avoided my gaze. "I found out recently. I thought maybe we could figure it out together. Maybe your mom could." I slammed my palm against the table. "My mom? She's fighting illness, Jack. She's already juggling hospital bills. And you want me to beg her for nearly $500,000? The room went silent except for Linda's soft sobs. Jack leaned closer, his voice low. "It's not about them, Maria. It's about us. This house, it's our future. We can't just let it go." My chest burned with anger, but guilt gnawed at me too. My mom always told me family sticks together. Was this what she meant? Or was I just being pulled deeper into a trap I didn't see coming? That night, I called my mom. My voice shook as I explained everything. The debt, the repairs, the looming foreclosure. She listened quietly, her breathing uneven from the treatments. Finally, she said, "Maria, if this is what you want, I'll help. But promise me every cent is documented. Receipts, agreements, signatures, no blind trust." Tears blurred my vision. Even in her frailty, she was stronger than I was. "I promise, Mom." When I told Jack, his face darkened. "Why all the paperwork? Why can't she just trust us?" I snapped. "Because it's $450,000, Jack. This isn't a favor, it's my mother's life savings. She deserves protection." He muttered under his breath, but didn't argue further. Days later, the money was wired, documents signed, receipts carefully stored in a locked folder my mom insisted I keep. Linda and Ron wept with gratitude, hugging me as though I'd saved their lives. But as I looked around that house, the freshly painted walls, the shining new pipes, I didn't feel like a savior. I felt like an outsider funding someone else's dream. And deep down, a chill settled over me. Because I knew debts that large don't just disappear. They linger. They chain. And I wondered if I had just shackled myself to a family that never truly wanted me, only what I could give. The weight of that 450 decision lingered in every corner of my mind. I tried to convince myself it was temporary, that one day Jack and I would pay it back, that my mother would see her sacrifice wasn't wasted. But the stress gnawed at me. Then came the call that shattered everything. "Maria." My aunt's voice trembled over the line. "It's your mom. She didn't make it through the night." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. My chest tightened, as though the air had been sucked from the room. I clutched the counter for balance, whispering, "No, no, that can't be." The world blurred after that, planning the funeral, signing papers, accepting condolences that felt hollow. Through it all, Jack stood beside me, but his arms felt stiff, his words rehearsed. "I'm sorry for your loss," he'd murmur, then glance at his phone, distracted. At night, I cried into the pillow, aching for the one person who had always stood by me. My mother, my anchor, my voice of reason was gone. Her last act had been saving my marriage, and she never got to see the cost of that sacrifice. One evening, a week after the funeral, I came home earlier than expected. As I set down my keys, voices drifted from the living room. Jack's voice, sharp with frustration. "I can't keep this up. Living with her is exhausting. She's too much." My stomach clenched. Then Linda's hiss, low and urgent. "Just be patient, Jack. We need those receipts. Once Maria slips, we'll take them and burn them. Then she has nothing." Silence, followed by Jack's chilling reply. "Good. Because I'm done. I've already got someone else. Someone better. She actually has money. Maria's just baggage." The words stabbed deeper than any debt ever could. My knees threatened to buckle, but I froze in place, my breath shallow, the key still in my hand. They thought I was weak, too consumed by grief to notice. But in that moment, something shifted inside me. The tears dried. The pain hardened into something sharper. I forced my lips into a steady smile, opened the door with a loud slam, and called out, "I'm home." Linda appeared instantly, her tone dripping with sugar. "Oh, Maria, how are you holding up, dear? How are the funeral plans?" "Fine," I said evenly, my voice calm though my veins burned with fury. I caught their nervous glances, the tension in the air. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. My grief was still raw, but beneath it pulsed a new fire. They thought they'd buried me with my mother's memory, but they forgot she raised me to be smarter, stronger, sharper than they ever imagined. And I was about to prove it. Grief and suspicion became the rhythm of my days. I moved like a ghost through that house, my mother's death still raw, while Jack grew colder with every passing moment. He no longer reached for my hand, no longer asked how my day was. His eyes were always elsewhere, on his phone, on the door, anywhere but me. Then it happened. One evening, I returned from work to find Jack and his parents waiting in the living room. Their faces were stiff, rehearsed, like actors about to perform a scene. Jack stood, his arms crossed, his voice flat. "Maria, it's time you packed your things. I've found someone better. Today you're out." The words hung in the air, sharp and merciless. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I had given up my savings, begged my sick mother for help, sacrificed everything for him, and this was my reward. Linda's lips curved into a cruel smile. "It's for the best, dear. You'll land on your feet. We only needed your help until things stabilized." Ron chuckled, adding, "You were useful while it lasted, but this is our house. You don't belong here anymore." Something inside me cracked, but it wasn't despair. It was laughter. A low, incredulous laugh that bubbled up from my chest until it filled the room. Jack's eyes narrowed. "What's so funny?" I wiped a tear from my cheek, still laughing. "My husband. Have you lost your mind? Or did you forget something?" Their smug expressions faltered. I leaned forward, my voice like steel. "You think you've burned the receipts? That you've erased the proof of where the money came from? That was cute, but those were copies. The originals, the ones signed by every single one of you, are with my lawyer. Locked, notarized, undeniable." Silence. Linda's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Ron's chuckle died in his throat. Jack's bravado crumbled, his fists clenching at his sides. You're bluffing, he spat. Try me, I said, my tone ice cold. Go ahead. Throw me out. Because the next thing I'll do is press charges for fraud and theft. And trust me, the judge will love to see how you all conspired to drain a dying woman's savings. Linda's tears came fast. Crocodile tears this time. Maria dear, we didn't mean it like that. Your family. I cut her off with a glare. Family? My mother was family. She's gone now, and all I have left of her is the sacrifice she made to keep you afloat. And you thought you could bury me with her? Not a chance. Jack stepped closer, his face twisted with anger. You don't scare me. You're nothing without me. I smiled. No, Jack. I was nothing with you. Without you, I'm free. And soon, I'll be the one holding the deed to this house. The silence that followed was deafening. They sat there, three predators suddenly stripped of their claws. For once, they weren't in control, I was. That night, as I lay in bed, the grief for my mother still weighed heavy, but alongside it burned something fierce. Determination. They had tried to erase me, but they underestimated the daughter my mother raised. I whispered into the dark, as if speaking to her memory. Don't worry, Mom. I'll finish this fight, and I'll win. Because this was no longer just about money. It was about dignity, justice, and reclaiming everything they thought they could steal from me. And as I closed my eyes, I knew this storm wasn't going to drown me. It was going to wash them away. The morning after that explosive confrontation, the house felt different. Jack avoided me, stomping around with a clenched jaw, while Linda's cheerful facade had cracked into silence. Ron muttered about families sticking together, but his voice carried none of the confidence he once flaunted. I wasn't rattled. I was calmer than I'd been in months, because now, I wasn't just grieving, I was preparing for war. That afternoon, I walked into my lawyer's office with the folder my mother had insisted on. Inside were the signed agreements, wire transfers, and receipts, proof that the $450,000 had come from her account, proof that Jack and his parents had acknowledged every cent. My lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Evelyn, flipped through the documents and raised an eyebrow. Maria, you've got them cornered. With this, you can file for fraud, restitution, even property claims. They'll have no defense. Her words were a balm to the raw wounds inside me. My mother's foresight had become my shield. When I returned home, I called a meeting. Jack, Linda, and Ron sat at the kitchen table, their expressions a mixture of defiance and dread. I placed the folder in front of them and slid it open, the papers fanning out like a deck of cards. These, I said firmly, are the originals. Signed, witnessed, legally binding. The money you thought was yours? It's traceable, documented, undeniable. Ron swallowed hard. Maria, let's not make this ugly. We can work something out. Ugly? I interrupted, my voice steady. You conned me into draining my mother's savings. You plotted behind my back, mocked me in my grief. And Jack, I turned to him, my gaze unflinching. You betrayed every vow you ever made. I'm done playing nice. Jack sneered, trying to salvage control. So what? You want the money back? Too late. It's gone. I leaned back, almost amused. Not quite. Here's what's going to happen. Either you transfer this house into my name immediately, or I take all of this to court. Fraud, conspiracy, theft, you'll lose everything. And you'll do it in front of a judge. Linda's eyes darted to the folder, panic flaring. Maria, please don't. We'll be ruined. Then sign the papers, I said coldly. No games, no delays. For the first time, I saw fear in Jack's eyes. His bravado slipped, his face paling. He muttered something under his breath, then pushed back from the table. Fine, do it. Give her the damn house. The room went silent except for the scratching of pens on paper. I watched every signature, every stroke of ink. When it was done, Evelyn notarized the documents in their presence. The deed was mine. I gathered the papers into the folder, tapped it closed, and looked each of them in the eye. My mother saved you once. This is the last time. From now on, I don't owe you anything. Jack's parents sat slumped, defeated. Jack himself stormed out, his pride in tatters. But I felt a calm resolve settle over me. The house that once symbolized my entrapment was now proof of my survival. The day the papers were finalized, the house felt lighter, almost as if the walls themselves had shed the weight of lies that once suffocated me. For the first time in months, I slept without waking to the sound of my own racing thoughts. Jack and his parents, however, were unraveling. Word spread quickly among neighbors and family friends. Whispers turned to stares whenever Linda stepped into the grocery store. Ron stopped telling his long-winded sales stories because no one wanted to listen anymore. They had built their reputation on charm and appearances, and both were now in ruins. Jack fared no better. The woman he'd left me for this mysterious someone better dumped him within weeks. Rumor had it she realized he came with more baggage than money. Suddenly, the man who strutted with arrogant confidence was crashing on a friend's couch, nursing his pride with cheap beer. He called once, then twice. Then he showed up at the front gate with flowers drooping in his hand, his voice almost pleading. "Maria, I made a mistake. I see that now. We can start over." I opened the door just wide enough to look him in the eye. The same man who once told me to pack my things now stood broken, smaller somehow. I almost pitied him, but only almost. "You're not here because you love me," I said calmly. "You're here because your plan fell apart. I'm not your safety net anymore, Jack. Go." His face crumpled, but I shut the door. The click of the lock was final, a sound that echoed like freedom. Meanwhile, Linda and Ron downsized into a cramped apartment on the edge of town. Without my money, without their grand house, they were stripped of the one thing they valued most: image. They tried reaching out too, calls, letters, even showing up at the door with teary apologies. I blocked the numbers. I turned them away. I was done. One evening, I sat in the very living room where they once conspired against me. The same walls that heard their schemes now stood silent, peaceful. A cup of tea warmed my hands, and for the first time, I felt like this house truly belonged to me. It wasn't just brick and mortar anymore, it was proof that I had survived betrayal, manipulation, and heartbreak. Proof that I had stood my ground when they thought I would collapse. I thought of my mother then. Her laughter, her lessons, her strength. She had given me the tools to fight this battle, even if she wasn't here to see me win. And though the scars of this war would linger, so would the strength I had gained. Because in the end, they lost everything they tried to steal, and I gained the one thing they could never touch: my freedom. The first morning after Jack and his parents left for good, I woke to silence. Not the heavy, suffocating silence of resentment, but a calm, golden, quiet, broken only by birdsong outside the window. Sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a guest in this house. I felt like its owner. I brewed a pot of coffee and sat by the window with my favorite book, the kind my mom used to tease me about, mystery novels with dog-eared pages. For the first time in months, I didn't feel watched, judged, or drained. I simply felt free. This house, once filled with schemes and betrayals, now carried my story. The walls had heard Jack sneer, "Pack your things." They had heard Linda's whispers about burning my receipts, but now they heard only the quiet rustle of turning pages, the clink of a teacup, the steady beat of my own heart. I walked through each room slowly, touching the doorframes, the walls, the windows. It was mine. Not because Jack gave it to me, not because Linda and Ron surrendered it, but because I fought for it, because my mother's sacrifice gave me the strength to stand tall, and though I wished she were still here, I carried her with me. In every cautious step I took, in every smart decision she guided me toward. She had prepared me for this, even if neither of us knew it at the time. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch, neighbors passed by. Some waved, some stopped to chat, and I realized something simple but profound. Life was moving forward. Jack, Linda, and Ron were stuck in their cycle of blame and loss, but I had been given a chance to start over. I wasn't naive anymore. I knew how easily love could turn into betrayal, how quickly family could become users. But instead of bitterness, I felt clarity. My trust would never again be given blindly. My worth would never again be measured by what I could pay. To anyone listening, anyone who's ever been used, manipulated, or cast aside, remember this: You are not defined by the people who betray you. You are defined by how you rise after they've tried to break you. I lost money. I lost time. Most painfully, I lost my mother. But I gained something greater myself. My strength. My freedom. And as I sat in that armchair, sunlight warming my skin, I whispered softly to the woman who had always believed in me. I made it, Mom. I'm okay now. Because whatever storms came next, I knew I was ready.